I'm just a mouth on legs. Classic Doctor Who review, and my Patreon supporters this month have helped me narrow down a 5th Doctor story. Yes, joining the Patreon allows you to vote and help decide what classic ones I'm going to review. Getting the plug in there early, I am pushing it a little harder. I was going to say I apologize, but I don't. I could use the help. But in any case, so 5th Doctor, and this time I didn't necessarily stack the deck in terms of like only giving really good options for a 5th Doctor story, which I have done in a couple of instances lately because I kind of had a run of not great classic stories, so I did start only like pushing for better options. This one I did give a mix of stories that are well regarded for the 5th Doctor and ones not so well regarded. They picked one of the best regarded stories for Peter Davison's tenure as the Doctor, and that is Earthshock, which I had seen before. It had been quite a while since I saw it, though, and partially because it was so well regarded, it's also one of the ones that I saw when I first started watching Classic Who, and it's definitely something that's worth revisiting because when I first started watching Classic Who, I had a hard time getting into a lot of it, even some of the fairly decent stuff, just because I wasn't quite acclimated to the headspace of Classic Who yet. Now that I feel like I get it better, I was due to give this one another shot. So, yeah, I'm debating at what point to get into stuff that would be considered spoilery and how far into this 4-part story do I consider stuff to be spoilers. Because it's hard to talk about this one because it is so well known for very specific, very spoilery reasons. I'll let you know when I'm going to cross that line into outright spoilers. But this is the period of time where we have the Doctor traveling with 3 companions. He has Nyssa, Tegan, and everyone's favorite, Adric. And things start out, and the Doctor is... This Doctor is moody. I think part of why I have a hard time connecting with Davison as the Doctor is I have a hard time following his mood shifts. I mean, many of the Doctors can be moody, but I can at least, like, see what throws them in one mood or another a bit better. Oftentimes, I feel like Davison will just get into a mood and get snippy with everybody just because, and like I'm not even sure why half the time, and that's one of the things that throws me off. And I've said this before with other Davison stories, which is that his Doctor is surprisingly quick to violence. Like this is I think the 3rd Davison story I've seen where he has picked up and fired a gun. It's weird, like how frequently and readily he does that. At least it's weird to me. And, you know, maybe if I was more used to him as the Doctor, I could go into it, get into it a bit more. I'm not saying that, you know, it's forbidden for the Doctor to do that, but obviously the Doctor very rarely does that kind of thing. So when a Doctor who I feel like I don't get is also doing something that strikes me as undoctorish, yeah, it kind of throws me off a bit. But his performance and his rapport with pretty much all the characters, guests and companions, is pretty solid, and that works well. He's delivering the lines pretty well. Like I said, I am having a hard time sort of following his mood, I guess, a little bit at times, and I've still got that here, but it's not as severe here as I have sometimes found it to be. It is still a little bit, I think, you know, maybe it's just the fact that how cranky he is at times is just so at odds with sort of the softness of his face. And sometimes, you know, that kind of juxtaposition works. I think with him, part of the reason it doesn't is it just makes him seem petulant. it doesn't quite have the quality that at least I felt Matt Smith had, which was that he was a young man, but he felt like a much older one. Davison's doctor doesn't feel like an older man to me, so when he behaves in a way that, admittedly, all doctors prior to him and most of the ones after him behaved, when he would get moody and irritated, it just comes off as a bit more bratty because of how baby-faced he is. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I need to stop talking about Davison particularly because I keep waiting to warm to his doctor and it keeps not happening. Like, even though I see the supposedly really good stories. I don't know. So as far as the others, let's talk general setup of the TARDIS at this time. As I said, there's 3 companions and there should not have been. Like, they could not come up with good stuff for all 3 of these companions to be doing. It was really clear that it was overcrowded. Boy, wonder if that was a lesson that future showrunners would learn. But I mean, like, in the tail end of the show, they actually basically split the party because you've got Adric with the Doctor, you've got Tegan with this sort of military little squad, and then you've got Nyssa back in the TARDIS because she had to be somewhere and do something. I'm not sure she actually does anything of note other than read readouts on the console. But yeah, they really did have a hard time finding stuff for all 3 of them to do. And you can really feel the weight of that. And as far as the story goes, I'm going to have to... Okay. Well, I was going to say I have to get into something that's kind of a spoiler, or at least it would have been at the time this originally aired, but isn't really. But I'm going to hold off on that for a little bit longer. So, we've got this initial setup with the Doctor being in a mood, just landing in a cave system on Earth in the future. And happening to be there at that time is an archaeological team and kind of a military squad and the military squad is there because there's only one surviving member of the archaeological team. They're trying to figure out what the heck happened, and the Doctor sort of stumbles into this. Now, kind of what's interesting is the initial setup is fairly mysterious. There's a couple of blatant things that I'm like, okay, well, here's how it's going to go. So, like, there's basically a sort of a readout that one of the soldiers has on the surface that shows him, where everybody is, relatively in the cave system. But it said early on, it's cued for, living things and mammalian living things. So immediately you're like, oh, well, obviously there's going to be some sort of thing down there that isn't what they're designed to pick up, but it actually opens up a lot of possibilities. And honestly, and this is worth saying because this first episode especially is structured in a way that the reveal at the end of the first episode of what villains are behind everything is treated as a surprise, and everything up to that is sort of like, who are we dealing with? So that's actually kind of cool. And most people at this point probably know. I don't know what the box art is like on it. Like if you were to pick up the DVD or something, I'm pretty sure it shows who the villains are. But even beyond that, its reputation speaks for itself at this point. But if you don't know that first episode, my first guess would have honestly been the Silurians. You're under the earth at a paleontological site. They're finding dinosaurs. It only picks up mammals. The Silurians are reptilian based. That would have been my first guess. And it's kind of cool, the twist of kind of a spoiler now because it's at the end of the first episode, but it is also only the first episode. So the Cybermen, which I think was their first return since the Tom Baker episode. I forget which one it was. And I actually rather like this design on the Cybermen. There's a little touch where they've got sort of, they're the metallic looking whole thing, fairly standard in the general shape. But the mouth covering on the bottom jaw is semi-transparent, and you can see the human jaw moving behind that. Now, normally I consider that a fault, be like, I can see the performer under the costume. But in this case, I actually think it really works. And because, for me at least, the Cybermen are scariest when you get reminded that is whatever is left of a human being inside there. And I think that's a big part of why the what we've had for most of modern era Cybermen hasn't really worked for me quite as well, because they just look like robots. Like, the story has to go out of its way to remind you that there's a human being in there. Just functionally, they just feel like robots. But sort of seeing that is a semi-constant reminder of like, oh yeah, that's right. That was once a person. Whew. And it gives you that little creep factor, which is good. I mean, that's a good thing for the Cybermen to have. And there's little homages as well. If you got Cybermen kind of breaking through like clear plastic, I'm like, that's straight out of Tomb of the Cybermen. They're busting out of stuff, and yeah, so there's some cool little homages like that. It's fun watching the Cyber Leader sort of look back at earlier incarnations of the Doctor. We get some clips of the first, the second, the fourth. So I guess the third Doctor never ran into the Cybermen then, I guess. I assume they would have showed that if he had. And there's also, and this is a minor thing, but this is a touch that I really appreciate, given some stuff that drives me crazy with especially modern storytelling these days, which is that the Doctor sort of, they stumble across a bomb that with potential planetary levels of fallout down in this cave. So now we're getting into like second episode stuff at this point. Whether or not you consider that spoilers, I don't know. Like, overall, this is good. This is one of the better Fifth Doctor stories, certainly that I've seen. I still have like niggling things about it, but I'm gonna kind of get into that. And it'll get more spoilery as I go from here. So there you go. So so the Doctor obviously disables this bomb, and then tracks the signal for where the bomb was coming from onto a spaceship, and the Doctor and the team then go up there and then deal with the Cybermen there. So part of what I like about this is that the Cybermen, the bomb was supposed to detonate. And the Doctor foiled that plan. And then what goes on the ship is the contingency plan. It's even flat out called that by the Cyber Leader. And I like that as a detail, because one of the, like, modern stories, what it would have been was the Doctor was supposed to find the bomb and they expected him to disarm it. And it's all part of this grander plan that doesn't make sense, because why would you have being defeated as part of your plan? But like, this whole notion of the villains were planning all of this all along is so ingrained in modern day storytelling, and so many writers and directors or whatever think it's clever, and it's not. It almost never makes sense. I much prefer villains who have backup plans, as opposed to, I always knew this would happen. Like, well, no, I wasn't counting on that, but, you know, I have a plan B. I'm gonna do that now. So I like that, and I definitely appreciate that, certainly in the wake of a lot of stuff that I see today that drives me absolutely up the wall. So, what else we got? We got fairly decent supporting cast. There's surprising gender diversity in the supporting cast. It feels very agenda driven. That, I mean, the captain of the ship's a woman, first officer's a woman. There's a sergeant in the military who's a woman. I'm being facetious at this point, and I'll stop. But like, you kind of get what I'm saying. You choose to watch these things through that lens. Look, it applies to everything. But in any case, there is like kind of a cool mix of characters, and what I like about the human characters is that they are not. They are a mix of intelligences. They are a mix of agendas, because you've got, the guy who's heading up sort of the military squad, who, he's coming at it from that militaristic mindset, which tends to clash with how the Doctor likes to approach things. And it does a little bit. And he's kind of fixed in his ways. You've got the captain of the ship, who is not unintelligent, but is obviously very motivated by profit, because this is a freighter, and if they don't get back to Earth by a certain time, they don't get a bonus. And she's making just bad decisions in the interest of preserving the bonus. There is one of her officers who is a traitor who comes across as incredibly by the book, and part of his betrayal is a bitterness towards the captain. It's actually surprisingly well rounded, and they're all pretty well performed as well. I like that this isn't a case of all the humans are on the straight and narrow, and the Cybermen are the villains. Like, no, the human, we've got a traitor in the humans' midst, but even the quote unquote good humans are flawed. They're, human. Ha! So that's cool. I mentioned Nyssa. She's kind of useless in this one. Tegan has a few nice moments. Plus, she's got some nice lines. But let's finally get to the big spoiler thing if you don't know what's going on in this story. So this is your last warning before I start to get into this. Let's talk about Adric. So, first of all, I would say that regardless of what you think about Adric specifically, it felt very clear that 3 people and 3 companions in the TARDIS is too many, and somebody needed to go. And it's kind of funny watching it and knowing that Adric dies by the end of this, that at the start he's saying, I want to go back home. I'll plot, the course to take me to my alternate dimension that I come from. And part of me, even though later on there's a bit of dialogue, did you actually want to go back? He's like, no, just wanted to make a point. But when he first started being all insistent about it, I'm like, oh my God, it's like he's going, I've only got 2 weeks until retirement. No wonder he died. And actually, while I've seen a couple of other Adric stories, not a ton, he's actually not bad in this. He's a little whiny, but you definitely, his frustration with the Doctor specifically does not come across as excessively childish, because the Doctor is actually kind of being a jerk, especially towards him, and he's got validity to his issues and how the Doctor's treating him. So and that sort of helps with the poignancy, because if he was as annoying here as he can be in other episodes, then nobody would care when he died. We'd just all be dancing and going woohoo, which I'm sure some people still were anyways. But there is, I actually really like the closing moment, right before he dies, this idea of he's on the freighter that is effectively going to be the meteor that kills the dinosaurs, which is in and of itself kind of a cool idea. I kind of like that as a whole notion. And he's doing all this stuff to try and stop the impact, and the Cybermen ensure that he won't be able to, and it's going to crash in the distant past. And he just kind of looks at the approaching Earth that he's about to crash into, and he goes, I'll never know if I was right. Because he was doing all these calculations, and he was so certain that he had it figured out, what he had to do to be able to take control of the ship back. But then everything got disabled. He never had the chance to see if he was right. And there's something that is slightly childish about that adds to a bit to the tragedy. And I don't mean childish in he's throwing a tantrum or pitching a fit, but just something like, I was in the middle of this and I don't even get to finish. That sense of it just has that tone of, that's not fair to it, which, some people never grow out of the concept of trying to find, trying to forcing everything to be quote unquote fair. But, that is very much a mentality that is driven in the mind of a child. It's supposed to be fair. This isn't fair. And I think that adds to the sadness of it, in addition to sort of the suddenness of it. I do think, for me, the closing credits for the last episode being with no music and just showing his broken little badge thing is a little cheesy. But I mean, I get why they did it, especially considering that, like, companions dying, not really a thing that happened much, if at all. Did a companion die before Adric? I don't think so. Like, lots of people always died in these. I don't think a companion had died prior to that, though. So, you know, I can't fault them too much for taking a little bit of a momentous moment with it, even though it's a little cheesy. I think that's about it. Adric was no great character. Again, I haven't seen a ton with him, but what I've seen of him, what little I can remember of the stories I've seen that he is in, because by and large I don't even remember him. What I do remember is him being kind of whiny and annoying, like many child characters are in these things. Like, you know, he's Wesley Crusher. Why do sci-fi shows never learn? Why do they keep sticking kids into these things? And they're always like uber intelligent bratty kids too. I don't know why. Anyways, so it was. I do feel that this story, and also for Adric as a character, this is probably a better send off than the character deserved. But you know, it does work. I feel like at the end of the day, I wasn't blown away by this because. Well, largely because of Davison. I'm still trying to find a hook in with this guy. Things don't quite click into place with me. And the more I think about it, I think it might be the age. I think it might be how young he is, but not just how young he looks, how young he feels in his performance. Because I can think of, like, Time Crash, the short thing that he appeared in with Tennant, and he honestly works way better for me in that because he's visibly older and he feels older, and it works way better. He's kind of worked better for me in Big Finish too because he has the feel of age behind him. What in previous Doctors came across like the arrogance of age and experience and knowledge, with Davison really feels like the impetuousness of arrogant youth, which, I don't know, it just doesn't quite work for me with the Doctor. It's the wrong kind of arrogance. But he still plays the part, you know, decently, and he's got a pretty good script, but I know other people do like Davison. I just have yet to find a story where he really clicks for me. I don't know. Still waiting. It's still a pretty good story, though. It's a solid 4-parter and a pretty good send-off for a not very good companion. So there we go. Earthshock. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of links as well. I mentioned the Patreon. I'll leave it at that. But there's links to other stuff, too. Check it out if you feel like it. If you don't, that's okay. Because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.